Farone starts his wonderful book by talking about some very sort of delightful literary references to magic and erotic magic and Greek love and love magic in general. But when he starts looking at the rituals themselves, things get dark. So let's just look at the three rituals that I'm calling dark eros. Because remember here, we have a sense of eros, the erotic films, erotica. Here with eros is an unhealthy passion. It's an agitatedness. It's being sick with love, compelled with desire, so much so that it's an unhealthy state. So let's look at this first spell. Bring to perfect, and these are all found on page 3. Bring to perfection the content of this binding love spell. A lot of these spells are about binding. In order that Theodotus, the daughter of Eos, may never have experience of another man than me alone. Ammonian, she be enslaved, driven mad, flying through the air in search of me, Ammonian, son of Hermitatus, and so that she brings her thigh to my thigh and her nature to my nature for intercourse. The Greek word here is phusis, meaning the sexual organ, always for the entire time of her life. Sounds miserable. Right, moving forward. Drag Haronus by her hair and her guts to me, Poseidonias, every hour of time, by night and day, until Haronus comes to me, Poseidonias. Now, quickly, quickly. Notice the use of names. Throughout magic, you'll see the use of the name is a thing. You have to know the proper name of a person to manipulate them. And for some contemporary magicians and magicians throughout time, they would take on a magical name that is different from their standard name, their magical motto, they would call them. All right, the final one. Burn, torch the soul of Alus, her female body, her limbs, until she leaves the household of Apollonius. Lay Alus low with fever, unceasing sickness, incomprehensible sickness. So in the first one we see, and the second one we see a woman being pulled away from her home to a man where she will be constantly in sexual congress or in desire of that man. In the third one, we see that the soul and body of this woman is just destroyed with desire that makes her ill. These drawing forth spells are called agoge. I don't know what I would call that third one. I can't think of the Greek term right now. Okay. So what are our contexts here? Well, hold on. Let me go back and say a few more things. So one of the things about names, like I said, the name is really important. In a lot of these spells, we'll have a record and we'll have the names in there, but someone could read this and then just take the names out and put new names in. And sometimes we've actually found some of these spells that actually just like have a blank space or a word that means insert person here. We find this also in the Sanskrit literature. There's a word called amuka. And if you have a spell that says bring amuka here to me, it basically means bring so-and-so, bring name insert here to me. So this is a magic principle we'll see elsewhere, is that spells can be set out and names swapped in and out to have the effects on whichever targets you so desire. Also, notice the violence and the sadism here. They're aggressive. And eros, this feeling of affliction by desire, is truly unpleasant. I'll talk more about this in a minute. So what's our context here? So what do we know about ancient Greece? This is the Hellenic world, which I've said before, which is the land and which is a place that is Greek in land and Greek in language, as opposed to the Hellenistic world that comes later when Greek is spoken around the Near East and around the Mediterranean, but that culture is not culturally Greek per se. So thus the Hellenistic world is Greek in language, but it is translocal. It spans and goes across various landforms and various what we would think of now as countries or geographic regions, whereas the Hellenic world is more central, it's more local. The Hellenic world ranges from 8th to the 1st century BCE. It's all Greek language, small city states, shifting beliefs and practices, but overall it's a Greek religion that's quite local and set up in the area. After the 1st century BCE, magic becomes less local or amateur and becomes the domain of professional magicians using handbooks or grimoires, from the French word grammaire, as in grammar, like a grammar of language. A grimoire is almost a grammar of magic ritual. So In the Hellenistic world, we have more, and in this later Hellenistic world, we see more professional sorcerers working with clients. In the Greek world, it's more like DIY magic. So the era of the professional magicians, as I said, is in the Hellenistic world. Now, our great archive here is the Greek magical papyri, which has been recently published. And I meant to pull that out, but this was published a while back. It's a great edition. This is the University of Chicago edition of the translation. Okay, the Greek magical papyri is a collection of obscure manuscripts, or papyri, from papyrus. So these papyrus leaf papers. Okay, so it's a collection of obscure manuscripts published and translated in the 20th century, but reflecting spell troves and archives in the Hellenistic era. And I had a video for this for you today, though many contents can be identified belonging to the Hellenic world. So it's not purely Hellenistic. We can find some Hellenic stuff in the Greek magical papyri. So we're talking about love magic. Greeks did not actually have a science. Science hadn't been invented yet, really. So they didn't really have a science or a method to verify whether magic would be effective, whether a specific operation would be effective or not. And in general, Greeks were known for being quite tolerant. They were polytheists, and they didn't have a discourse of an exclusion. Magic wasn't illegal. They didn't really frown upon magic in any way. It was normative, or it was not normative. It was still a funny way to be. It was still weird if you were doing magic, but it wasn't illicit or illegal. So the big interest for Ferrone here is the interpersonal between people use of love magic, which are spells used by persons to force others to lust after, fall in love with, or be more affectionate toward themselves. These are most frequent attestations in the archive. There's a lot of them here. So what we do also see is that Greeks had a very high level of anxiety around these erotic magic rituals, for the simple reason that they really valued the sense of personal autonomy. And deploying one of these rituals, and if it's effective, it takes away personal autonomy. It takes away personal agency. It manipulates others and takes away their own wills and desires.